Today, I want to talk about the top three startup killers that really can change the fate of your business, especially in the early days. By paying attention to these kind of critical areas, if you focus on them and have answers to them, answers that make sense for your specific business, you can really change the whole experience at the early stage. So let's dive right in. First, demand. It seems like such a small thing in the context of, but of course people are going to want it. I mean, we're building something great. Sorry. People are not just going to believe that what you're offering is great. People are going to believe that other people want it, that your thing is great because other people want it. And it's up to you to showcase that. Ultimately, you can build the best product in the world, but if nobody wants it, it's not really the best product in the world. First, it's impossible to know if everyone will love your solution. That's just a fact of the matter. In fact, it's pretty much a 100% chance that not everybody's going to love your solution, but that's okay. You're not building for one customer, you're not building for every customer. You're building for the sum average of the average customer that will convert and stick with your business for a long time. Right? A lot more confusing, but it's the truth of what actually gets you to your end goal of building a successful startup. It's very easy to know if the person right in front of you loves it. This is the difference between product market fit, right? Are we successful at scale? And is there all this information and all these people that really like us and all this news and all this media? That's one way of course, showing that you're differentiated and amazing. That's hard to do in the early days, right? It's hard to do when you're small. It's hard to do when you're only a few months, young as a startup. But what you can do is build something, whether it's an MVP or an example or workflows, and we can talk more about that, but you can build something and show it to one person by one person by one person, one by one by one, and see their eyes light up. You can see someone want it. You can see someone identify the value. And that comes from smaller, much more focused, much more engaged customer interaction. And that's where demand in the early days can really be validated. I tend to focus on two core areas when it comes to demand. First is the reason to buy. Meaning if I had to explain it and my ultimate audience is like an actuary, right? Somebody that's just numbers and calculation and math and optimal, because if you can sell to them, you can basically sell to anybody. So the reasons to buy: more revenue, less expense, a better experience, which if a customer has a better experience, do you think they're likely to come back or stick around or engage? Of course. Or reduced risk, AKA insurance, right? Nobody wants to have it, but hey, if it reduces your risk and the risk is very substantial and the cost to reduce that risk isn't as substantial, well, there you go. Notice how these are very compelling. They're very logical. They track to a balance sheet or to a board meeting, in a very compelling way. It's a good reason that I like to focus on these elements. Second is emotion. Now, the reason I listen for emotion are most buying decisions are emotional. Yes, a CFO buying a new automation software for their manufacturing business, they're probably not like all up in, their heartstrings about it, but they're making an emotional decision of, hey, this will drive our returns up 20%. That's going to make me look really good. That's going to make the business do good. I'm going to get more money. So even though it's not emotional and like, I love those shoes, you're walking at the mall and you go buy them, it's emotional in the sense of there's a, hey, I'm going to get praise. I'm going to get more money. I'm going to get a beneficial output from here. I have a reason to care. The other way to look at this is more of a, when an individual customer looks at the product, what is their reaction? My number one thing that I listen for are the expletives, right? If someone goes, holy shit, this is amazing. Or if someone goes, damn, this is going to make my whole life easier. That's authentic. That's real. Not just because they're cursing in a professional environment or what have you, but because there's a real feeling attached to it, because that the problem that you've tapped into by showing the solution that, is really coming to the aid here of this problem, that problem is real. And that problem is real annoying because it's drawing out an emotion of someone going, oh my God, I don't have to do this anymore. This is amazing. Exactly. It's exactly right. Remember, Buying is always more emotional than logical. And this is just the broad strokes. It's not to say you should go talk to a CFO, with a violin in your hand and make them feel something. But it does mean that if you're dealing with the average person, you should be thinking, what's in it for them? Why would they and their emotions, why would they choose to care about my business? Hey, this is going to make your job easier, your experience easier, your returns better, what have you. Build that demand and validate it from every audience you can in every way that you can, because ultimately that demand turns to customers and those customers turn to revenue. And that is a great place to be. Next, differentiation. Can you compete? Fundamentally, you're going to be operating in a pretty competitive market. Even things that are in the quote unquote blue ocean, the ocean's not going to stay blue for very long, right? There's going to be competitors. There's going to be things in there that even if they don't directly compete, they do impact your sales. They impact the way that you build and operate at a fundamental level. The big question is, why would someone pick you versus the other choices? And here's a key thing to note. If there's no direct competitor or indirect in that way, the why would someone pick you versus the other choices becomes why would someone pick you versus the status quo? Because things are the way they are, right? If a to-do list is very inefficient, but it's the one they use every day and they're used to it, you have to overcome the hurdle of them having built in that habit, that pattern of, well, this is my to-do list. Yeah, I lose it half the time, but I always have more pens and more paper. It's fine. You have to get them to go, oh man, I should really level up my to-do list. I should change the way that I engage with this thing in my life. And now I'm going to do it using this app, this way. I choose this. And they may not be choosing for forever, but they're at least choosing to try. This is critical because both customers and investors will want to know, depending on, of course, where you are at a startup. If you're a customer, or if you're thinking the customer side, it's, of course, how do we get people to say, yes, they want our stuff versus the other? If you're talking on the investor side, they want to hear, because you may be pre-customer validation in terms of really validating tons of demand, they want to know what's the argumentation, what's the logic. Oh, they would pick our product, if we're selling paper towels as an extreme example, because we're 30% more absorbent. It's like, okay, regardless of the design and the packaging and the brand and how you position and how critical it is to the whatever of America, we're 30% more absorbent. People want paper towels that absorb more. Therefore, we think there's a really good argument that we can build demand and that customers will want it. Now, even if they didn't show it to a single customer, as long as the paper was, safe and hygienic and there's no issues, right? All the little check boxes are checked. It's a good thing for it to be more absorbent, and that's a clear differentiator that they can engage with. That's a good thing. That's a great thing to have. If there isn't a reason to pick you, it shouldn't be surprised that the odds of someone picking you are going to be quite low. Some examples of this include product quality. Not a little bit better, a ton better. The easiest example that everyone has seen and experienced in their own life, if you're old enough to be watching and understanding this video, is the iPhone. Phones were good before. Phones were 7 out of 10, you did what you need to. Obviously, we thought they were 10 out of 10. They were always getting better. And then iPhone came out and went from 7 out of 10 to 12 out of 10. It changed the game. And yes, there were 100 limitations, but anyone that could see even 4 feet into the future could very easily see, oh, okay, there's going to be some big waves that come following this. And now every phone is basically a version of an iPhone. That kind of shows you how good the quality is. It does not mean you need to reinvent the iPhone in order to get a sale. Let me be very clear. It does mean you need to give people a good reason to go, oh, this product is way better than the other one. Superior user experience. A lot of products and a lot of offerings in modern times are quite funny because everyone's offering a lot of the same things. My favorite example of this are CRMs, customer relationship management tools, because how many different ways can you have a customer profile and automated email and a calendar and a booking thing? Like, it's all the same. And that's fine because people need those things. But how they're packaged, how they're priced, how they interact with each other, if they have, external connections or different things that can really make them more valuable in a specific ecosystem, right? A CRM for people that work in the marine industry, a CRM for people that are in aviation and deal with the FAA. Like, there are different ways to look at this, but specialization and focus specifically tailored to an individual's unique user experience, really valuable, really, really valuable. Last, pricing models. Sometimes something just is cheaper or better or easier. One of my favorite examples is I have a bunch of friends and different people in startup land where a number of their businesses are, the big guy, whoever it is in the space that's building something similar to them has a horrible pricing structure and really complex onboarding and just all this nonsense. And they're like, do you know how many businesses would love to use their software but can't because of all the impediments that have been put in the way? My whole business, my being some of my friends, my whole business is I'm just going to build their software because, they don't have a monopoly on it. And I'm going to make the onboarding and pricing and just overall user experience 100-fold easier, cheaper, more efficient. That is a really compelling opportunity, right? Because the product is proven, the demand is there, there's tons of friction, and someone in the space is saying that they want it and would be willing to rebuild it if they could just, use it in their system. Notice it all came from pricing, right? Because onboarding is a pain and this, that, and the other. But if it's cheap enough, you'll go through the hell of, a pretty bad onboarding. But if the pricing is high, if the pricing is unfair, unreasonable, or, not managed appropriate with the industry they're engaging with, you can see where little competitors pop up all over. Here's another great example. Salesforce. Salesforce is great, but Salesforce is so damn expensive that it's like, of course, so many startups and early stage businesses can't even afford to think to use them. Then you've got features and companies that came out like HubSpot, which are free or have free little offerings. And then Salesforce comes out with Salesforce for startups and all of this cat and mouse, all to come to the conclusion of, hey, maybe we need to make this more accessible on a pricing and, onboarding basis for our customers. And notice that's all differentiation. And last, duplication. Can you scale? This is an important piece because remember, we're in startup land. We are not in small business land. And there can be $100 million a year small businesses. Absolutely. At that point, you're a mid-sized business or a large business, depending on your industry, right? But whatever. Much more of when we're talking with startups, we really care about scale and how efficiently scale can happen as a measure of investment and revenue. Fundamentally, what this means is we are more investment than customer focused. Now, of course, what that means is we love our customers, we care about them, we care about doing all this stuff, but we need to invest in getting more and more and more. We need to collect cash and put that cash back into our business to get more customers to scale, to build more product to scale, to build more systems to scale. And notice, I'm not saying we do this preemptively. We do this, you wait for something, you find your weakest link, your the choke point, and then you widen the choke point, and then you find the next choke point and you widen the choke point. You do it over and over and over, and that allows your business to kind of flourish over time. But that investment is critical because you're investing time, energy, cash, all of these things, whether you're making it because you're making money or you're raising it because you're raising a ton of capital. Some startups love to go bootstrap. Some startups love to do the whole external fundraising thing, whatever, floats your boat, but it matters. Now, for investors that are assessing startups, this is especially critical because, of course, they're investing in a startup, not a small business. They want to see that your business can scale, that it can grow, that it can outpace in terms of customers its cost. Fundamentally, when we're thinking of duplication and scale, it's, can I grow my revenue 5-fold and grow my costs 2-fold? That means scale. And of course, part of scale is having demand. You can have all the potential in the world to scale to great economies of scale, get good cost reduction. But if you don't actually have the demand to meet that, you're building a whole city for ghosts. You're building a ghost town. Getting big is one thing, but size plus cost plus speed is another. This is the kind of framework that I tend to think about duplication in. How big are we going to get? Because $100 million business is great. A $10 million business is great. A $1 billion business is extra great, right? But how big are we trying to get? How much is it going to cost, per unit, per total investment, et cetera, to get there? If we can be $100 trillion company, but it's going to cost us 50 trillion to get there, it's not really, the best place to be, right? But if you can turn my 25 grand into $100 million company, forget the billion. Forget the billion. You turn 25 grand into 100 million, we're doing just fine, kid. And last but not least is speed. You can have all the best scale in the world, but if it takes you 2 months to onboard a customer, no amount of demand will save you. And this is why I always tend to focus on like the choke point theorem, as it were, where it's, hey, if we build tons of demand and then we see our onboarding is failing us, it doesn't mean our onboarding should be so horrible that, people are leaving, but it's like, hey, we can only afford to onboard like 2 customers a week. My next question is not, how do we get to onboarding 50 customers a week? It's, how do we do 4? That's 100% improvement. Then how do we do 8? Then how do we do 16? Because those incremental improvements tier us up to having more cash, more customers, more revenue, more investment capital to actually widen the choke point more and more and more, versus trying to go all in on something and make the customer funnel perfect for 1 million customers and we have 1,000. It's like kind of a waste. The premise of startups are high growth, where costs do not scale with revenue. If your costs are scaling with your revenue, that's a bad sign for startups. Totally fine if you're doing a regular business, as long as you've got some margin in there for, profit. But fundamentally, we're trying to play a different game here. The big question that I would encourage you to ask when you're looking at, can my startup scale, right? Do I pass the duplication test? Is, can we grow 10 to 100x in the next 3 to 10 years efficiently? If not, if that idea itself isn't viable from a, do I even remotely believe this as a founder, as an investor? Because again, I'm asking you to predict the future. If the answer isn't a very resounding yes, like this is a possibility, this is on offer, then you can't really fault an investor or someone who's interested in joining a startup to not join yours, right? Because you're offering a bad deal. Be like me showing you a house that's worth 500,000 and I'm getting in the real estate play because I want to take it to 1 million. And then the day before closing, you go, oh, it's only going to go to like 600,000. It's like, well, guy, like, not for nothing, that's not the deal I'm trying to sign up for. That's not the game I'm playing here. So I'd prefer if I could do a startup that actually allows for that and allows for that level of growth. Now, typically you're looking at closer to the 3 to 4 to 5 years than the 10 years. But if you're making a big old company, a unicorn or a decacorn or anything like that, you shouldn't be surprised if it takes you 3, 4, 5, 7, 10 years. But by the time you're on year 3, 4, 5, you're going to know if you're going for that route, and the decisions become different. But generally speaking, you're looking at that 3 to 5 year window for the most critical and kind of high priority growth focus. Modern VCs and angels very often, and this is a 2023, 4, 5, and it feels like this is the trend and only getting stronger. They really are not caring just about growth. I meet customers and clients and mentees and random startups and biz dev people all the time with these crazy businesses or tons of demand, but there's no path to profitability, which means that people want their stuff, but they're not willing to pay for it. Or the founder hasn't found a good pricing model to enable them to pay for it, whether it's freemium, whether it's a one-time fee, whether it's usage, the more they use it, the more it costs, whether it's they use it and they do advertising to them, or there's like an an experience with ads and an experience without ads, that kind of other freemium model versus like a freemium subscription. But if your financial model of revenues minus expenses equals profit, the fundamentals, if that doesn't yield a positive result in those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, again, it shouldn't be surprising that a business or an investor may be less excited to work with you, to buy you, to invest in you, not because companies that aren't profitable aren't valuable, but because depending on the situation in the market, there could be other companies that look a lot like you that are profitable, that can add value from day one. They don't have to go in and try and find a way to cut costs. They can just find a way to start building and growing and scaling. And this has become a next level of differentiation. Before, it was good enough just to have the idea. Then it became good enough to have the idea and the product. Now it's transitioned, or then it jumped from product and idea to product, idea, and some demand. Now, in like the most kind of intense part of the crucible, it's the idea, the product, the demand, and some proof in terms of, is there a real financially viable business model here? Because if you have the first three and there's no business model, what that means is I have to consistently bet on your ability to raise money from the bank, from investors, from whoever, because you're telling me you're not going to be able to make money on your own. If you choose to not be profitable because you choose like, oh, we're doing a ton of investment. If we turned off the investment and just continued to grow our customers per X, Y, and Z, we'll hit profitability and break even in 18 months. Amazing. That's perfect. And then if you're still net negative for the next 6 years, who cares? Because you're choosing to be negative. It's not that you're sitting there going, we're selling it for the highest price we can and nobody wants to buy it. It's like, well, that just means you're building something bad, unfortunately, or you're not charging for your thing right, or you need to adjust your value focus. Again, startups are a real hard game, and finding a way to build a good one, good, which is driven by the current market sentiment, let's say, is a really difficult lift. So the question is, did you pass? Do you have demand? Do you have a compelling way to differentiate? And can you duplicate and scale? The answer to this, I don't think, is very much a binary yes or no, because there's arguments to be made depending on any business that is looking at this and where you are in the process. But it's really a question of, if you were to rate yourself, really aggressively, and imagine you're a hard, judge on yourself. On a scale of 1 to 5, you can't use 3. 1, horrible. 5, amazing. 2 is okay to good. 4 is great, right? Where do you sit? Because if you say my demand's at like a 2, my question is, how do we get it to a 4? If you say, oh, my differentiation's a 4, I go, all right, is there a way to get it to a 5, or is a 4 good enough? If we think a 4 is good enough, we do ourselves no benefit by just digging in 100-fold there, when we could easily focus on the demand side and go from a okay, good to great, meaning a 2 to a 4, versus trying to get a 4 to a 5, which is, perfect or whatever. And duplication, much the same way. You don't have to know about every level of duplication, because of course you can't predict the future 5 years from now, but you should understand LTV and CAC, right? Lifetime value and customer acquisition cost. And if you're not making more money than it's costing you to get that customer, that's a problem. And that's something that needs to be thought through and worked through and built upon in order for you to actually have a solid business, in order for you to get investment in particular, because you can build your startup for years. And I've worked with founders and met founders that have been working on their business for years because they didn't have to answer to investors. And some are doing it part-time and slowly, and others are just struggling because they're not getting the demand. They're not focused on the duplication. They're not focused on the differentiation. And these are critical things that I think will really change the experience for you. At least they have for every startup I've worked with, whether it's my own, my clients, my mentees, everywhere. These are big topics that I focus on. And that's it. Hopefully this helps you get a better sense of how to assess your startup, as well as some critical pitfalls, to look out for. And I'm looking forward to teaching you more in the next video.